Hey there, folks. Ted from Sportsmans Finest here in Austin with our friends from Pack Mule, continuing our fly fishing series. Today, we're going to kind of talk and unravel the mysteries of leaders. Sometimes when people get into fly fishing, it can be very overwhelming deciding on leaders. You walk up to the leader wall and it's like, oh, where do I start? I'm going to kind of try to keep it really just kind of base level and just kind of give an overall explanation of leaders. For those of you that come from the conventional background, throwing spinning rods, bait casters, grew up, that kind of stuff, this is going to be kind of the closest thing to anything that you might be familiar looking in the fly fishing setup. And the reason that is because the leader end of your setup, again, going back to what we talked about in the previous videos, we talked about on a fly reel, you're going to have the backing, then you have your fly line, then you have your leader. And again, the leader is essentially a piece of monofilament that attaches to the front end of your fly line. And this is going to be your delivery system for when you make your cast that helps present that fly to your target. Now the leader is going to be, it's a tapered piece of monofilament. It's going to be thick in the back end. And what they do is they put it in a machine and it extrudes it so they can actually nowadays, instead of tying these and making these tapers, they actually make an extruded taper where in the butt end of the leader, which is the part of the leader that attaches to your fly line, it starts thick in the back end. And then as it goes forward to the front end of your leader, you're going to have what's called the tippet section of your leader. So when your leader tapers down, the last probably right around 30 inches of your leader on average is going to be your tippet section. And again, that tapers down. The reason for that taper is as you cast, what the taper does of that leader, as you cast your fly, having that leader on, it helps slow the energy from your cast, that your fly line, when you make your cast that's kind of going through that fly line, what this does is help spill that energy so when you're delivered to your target, it kind of lays near your target nicely. So that's the purpose of that taper. And when you start thinking about choosing a leader, on average, the average leader length is going to be 9 to 7.5 foot. A good gauge to use on that. Some people will kind of stick toward, you know, if you have a 9-foot rod, you use a 9-foot leader. If you have a shorter rod and say the 8.5, 7 foot, the shorter rods, you might choose to stick with a 7.5 foot leader. Now that's not the case across the board. Personally, I do like 7.5 foot leaders because I enjoy kind of changing my taper on them and adding stuff to it. So you can manipulate these leaders, but to keep it pretty simple, just kind of think about it's either a 9-foot or 7.5 foot leader. Starting out, sometimes when somebody's new to casting, we'll suggest a 7.5 foot leader. It's just a little easier to cast and it turns over a little bit better. And one thing, as I pull this leader out, before we go in too much more into the leaders, what I want to talk about is when you look at a package, on a leader package, you're going to see a lot of numbers on here. You're going to notice on this leader package, hopefully you can see this pretty well, is on these leader packages, you'll see I've got a 7.5 foot leader, which is this number here, and then I've got a number here that says 9 foot. You're also going to notice on these leaders, you see a 2X, and you see a poundage here. And if I go, so here, I'm going to show you another leader. You may see here's a 7.5 foot leader. It says 4X and then 7.5 pound. It's like, man, what does that mean? It can be really confusing to people, especially those that come from a conventional background. Because a lot of time in conventional fishing, we think of the pound test that we're throwing versus thinking of the actual diameter of the tippet end of your leader. The X system, and that's what this X, this 2X, and on this other leader, the 4X, that's what I'm referring to, and that's what that's referring to is the diameter of the tippet. And again, the tippet is, I'm going to say the business end of your leader. Again, your leader starts thick, right next to the fly line, and it tapers down to that tippet end of your leader, and that's where you're going to attach your fly. Now, the reason I talk about the importance of the diameter versus the poundage, and then again, this can change a little bit down the road. You may think of it a little bit differently, but for today, what we want to think about is I've got a chart here, and we're going to have this chart posted where you can see this. And this chart is not something I created. This is something that is in a lot of fly fishing books. You can search this. Again, this chart is going to explain to help you understand how to choose and understand leaders. Because again, when I talked about the importance of choosing a leader based off of diameter versus pounds, you can look at this chart right here. What this has is, if you look at this chart, and again, we're gonna have this chart posted where you can look at it more in detail. And again, instead of looking at the video, you may find a book with it and it'll help you. What this leader has is, this chart, the chart has is on this side right here, I'm gonna have, this has got the diameters, okay? And then we're gonna have what's called the X, there's the X's. So when you look at again, when you look at these leaders, it's gonna say 2X, 1X, 4X. That's what this is referring to. And again, those X's refer to these diameters. The pound test right here, this is gonna vary a lot between manufacturer and material you use. So some of that stuff at first is gonna be, try not to get too hung up on that. Think about this diameter. And again, if you wanna use this as a guide, on this side, on this line right here, this column right here, this is gonna be a hook size range. And again, this again is just kind of an average thing. This isn't like set in stone, because some fly sizes are a little different configurations. So some of this isn't the rule, but this is a great guideline. And for example, like if I look at, say if you're gonna go trout fishing in the mountains, or you're gonna think about fishing dry flies or something like that, you might come along the lines of, a lot of people might use a 5X leader for that if they're gonna strictly do like dry fly fishing. So again, when I refer to that, so say somebody comes in and they come to the counter with a 5X leader. Again, if somebody comes to the counter, say they bought a 9-foot leader, they come to the counter with a 5X leader, and they've just decided, hey, I come to the counter and say, I'm going bass fishing. And you say, you're buying a 5X leader. And I would say that because for a 5X leader, if you look on this chart, the size range for throwing on a 5X tippet, again, a 5X leader, when I say 5X leader, that's again what that leader tapers down to. Again, this X system is going to refer to the business end of the leader, your tippet section, that last 30 inches of your leader, your tippet. That's where you're tying your fly on. So again, if you have a 5X tippet, let's say your leader again tapers down that 5X, you're going to be fishing hook sizes range 14, 16, and 18. So those are smaller flies. So if somebody came to the counter with a 5X leader and said, man, I'm going bass fishing this weekend, I might be like, are you sure? Are you going to be fishing flies that small? And if they weren't, then I might suggest another fly, or another leader with a different tippet size. I'm sorry, leader and tippet size. So again, we might start looking at, depending on the kind of bass fishing they're doing, because bass fishing can be done with 4X, 3X, all the way up to these larger size leaders, which are 1 and 0X. And so for example, let's say that if we go to a 2X leader, so if you're fishing a 2X leader or 2X tippet, again, I keep saying leader, I'm saying if your leader tapers down to that 2X, you're going to be fishing, according to this chart, 6, 8s, and 10s. And again, that's referring to hook size. Now the hook size can be tricky to kind of, because sometimes some flies are bigger than others, and so how those act on the different tippets and leader configurations can be, you may have to make some up or down sizing on that, but again, don't go too far into that. Just going to kind of keep it kind of like just on a basic level. So again, looking at this chart, if somebody was going to fish 6, 8s, and 10s, they might choose a 2X leader. Again, the leader with 2X tippet. So again, this is just kind of a great way to kind of gauge. So when people walk up to the tippet and go look for leaders and tippet, this is a great chart to kind of start with, to kind of help you understand how to choose leaders and tippet size. Again, think about diameter, again, which is your X marking in this, compared to hook size. So again, if you look at this chart, this will help you kind of have a little bit of understanding of understanding how to choose a leader. And I think that pretty much covers kind of the basics of understanding the basics of the leader. I hope that helps, and we'll see you on the next video. If you guys found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. Pack Mule has a series of videos that are dedicated to helping people get outdoors.